Today I will tell you about the night when my heart stopped believing. I collapsed, and as I fought for breath, strangers carried me into the ICU. The doctors dialed my only son, desperate for his voice to bring me strength. What came back was not comfort, but a sentence so cold it nearly killed me more surely than the illness ever could. In that moment, it felt as if the world itself turned away from me. But life is strange. Sometimes the very words that break you also awaken a part of you that refuses to die. I lived through that night, when no one thought I would. And after I rose, I made a choice. One that would turn his careless words into his greatest fear. If stories like this touch your heart, grandma life stories filled with love, justice, and the courage to begin again, please like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Now let me take you back to where it all began. My garden, under the quiet breath of a summer evening. I was 62, and my life had narrowed into two things: my small vegetable patch and the memories that filled the house my late husband once built for us. My hands, cracked and rough, pressed against the soil as I carefully tied the stems of my tomato plants to wooden stakes. Above the garden fence, the cicadas sang relentlessly, the kind of sound that reminds you both of abundance and loneliness. I bent over the patch of chrysanthemums, the bright yellow heads nodding under the sunlight. My knees ached, but the flowers gave me comfort. They were patient companions, never asking for more than water and attention. As I worked, I hummed the hymn my mother used to sing when I was a little girl. It made the silence less sharp. By the time I returned inside, the house smelled faintly of bleach and old wood. Dinner was waiting, a single bowl of watery rice porridge with a side of pickled cucumbers I had made weeks ago. I sat at the wooden table that once held feasts, my eyes drifting to the empty space where a watch used to rest. It was my husband's, a scratched but sturdy Seiko, the one he wore even on the day he passed away. The sight of that bare spot cut me deeper than hunger ever could. Across the room, the television blared in full color. There he was, my son, Adrian, 36 years old, handsome in the tailored navy suit he loved so much. His wife, Melissa, gleamed beside him, a hand resting on the curve of her designer gown. They smiled as they cut a ribbon at the entrance of a new office building, the crowd clapping, the cameras flashing. The announcer's voice described him as a self-made millionaire, a visionary tech entrepreneur. I spooned the thin porridge into my mouth, the taste of salt not from seasoning, but from my own tears. They had not visited me in months, not since Christmas, when Melissa presented me with a scented candle, as though it were a treasure, while I had knitted her a scarf with aching fingers. But tonight, on the television, they looked radiant, perfect, the kind of couple strangers adored and praised online. The contrast between their world and mine pressed down like a stone. My bowl rattled as I set it down. It wasn't bitterness that filled me then. It was something quieter, harder to name. Perhaps resignation, perhaps sorrow, or perhaps it was the faint stirring of an anger I had never allowed myself to feel. Outside, the sun slipped below the horizon. The crickets began their evening chorus. I walked back to the porch, settling on the old rocking chair with its worn-out cushion. The air was thick with the smell of damp soil and honeysuckle. My chest tightened briefly. I placed a hand against it and breathed slowly until the pressure eased. I thought about Adrian as a boy, the child who used to bring me dandelions clutched in dirty fists, shouting, "For you, Mama." The teenager who once cried when he failed his driving test. The young man who swore he would never let me down, gripping my hand at his father's funeral. I had lived through all his seasons, his laughter, his failures, his dreams. And yet here I was, invisible, alone, surviving on soup too thin to hold warmth. The garden, the chrysanthemums, the tomatoes, all of them seemed to whisper the same question: what happened to us? The night grew darker, the stars faint above the suburban streetlights. I closed my eyes, listening to the steady creak of the chair. I had no way of knowing then that within days I would collapse on this very ground, that doctors would call my only son in desperation, that he would speak the words that would shatter something inside me more completely than any illness could. For now, I only had my garden, my silence, and the empty place where my husband's watch used to lie. But even then, something inside me knew. This story was not going to end the way my son imagined. I once sold my house so my son could chase his dreams. It was not much, but it was mine, filled with years of memories. When Adrian looked at me and said, "Mom, I just need one chance. I'll pay you back, I promise," I believed him with every fiber of my being. I signed the papers, handed him the money, and told myself it was worth the sacrifice. I watched him board that plane, full of ambition. My heart swelled with pride. I thought I was giving him the wings he needed. For years I lived in a small rental, eating simply, counting coins, but I never regretted it. Every sacrifice, I told myself, was proof of love. When he returned, he was transformed. He wore tailored suits, spoke like a man who belonged on stages. Cameras flashed, people cheered, reporters called him brilliant. They said self-made. I smiled quietly in the background, telling myself all of this was built on my love. But then came the bills. One evening, I opened an envelope and felt my chest tighten. Airline tickets, business class, my name on the receipts, not his. Another page, Chanel handbags, luxury hotels, car services, again, all under my account. My hands trembled as I flipped page after page. It was not one mistake, it was a pattern. I sat down, staring at the numbers. My breath caught in my throat. I whispered to myself, "He's using me." Still. The words hurt more than I expected. I remembered the winters I wrapped myself in blankets instead of turning on the heater. I remembered selling my husband's tools to make ends meet. I remembered the house I gave away without hesitation. And here, in black and red ink, was the truth. My sacrifices had become his playground. The television flickered in the background. There he was, my son, smiling for the cameras, his wife dazzling in a designer gown. The crowd applauded. I sat with a bowl of thin porridge, the taste of pickled vegetables dull on my tongue. I glanced at the table. There was an empty spot where my husband's watch once lay. The only thing of his I had left. Gone now. I had noticed its absence weeks ago. I closed my eyes, swallowing hard. I folded the bills carefully, as though neat edges might soften the reality. I placed them in a drawer, forcing my hands to stop shaking. I told myself not to cry, not tonight. But a question burned in me. How much more can a mother give before she disappears entirely? I rinsed my bowl, set it on the rack, and stood in the quiet of my kitchen. The garden outside swayed gently in the breeze. Life pushed through soil even when neglected. A part of me longed to join it, to find strength again. Still, another part whispered bitterly that I was nothing more than an open account, a name to sign on the dotted line. And yet, somewhere deep inside, the smallest spark of defiance flickered, not forever. The sun was warm on my shoulders as I moved slowly along the row of flowers, watering can in hand. The steady rhythm of pouring water usually calmed me. That morning, however, something inside me shifted. A sudden tightness wrapped around my chest. My breath caught. I stopped, hand frozen in midair. It happened fast, so fast that I couldn't even prepare myself. A searing pressure climbed up my ribs, pressing harder with each second. I tried to inhale, but my lungs refused to open. I gasped, clawing at the air. The watering can slipped from my grip, crashed onto the stones, and spilled its contents across the soil. My knees buckled. I staggered once, then collapsed onto the ground. The world tilted sideways. I pressed my palms against the dirt, desperate to push myself up, but my arms trembled uselessly. My mouth opened to scream, to call out, "Help!" But only a broken rasp escaped. The sound barely rose above a whisper. I was alone. My vision blurred. The flowers I had tended for years swayed above me, their colors bleeding into one another. My throat tightened further. Panic roared inside me, but my body refused to answer. And then, amid the haze, a memory pierced through. Adrian, at 8 years old. His cheeks red from the winter wind, his tiny hands clutching the sleeves of a coat I had bought secondhand. I remembered counting coins at the kitchen table, folding each bill carefully so I could afford that coat. "It's warm, Mama," he had whispered, burying his face into the fabric. The pride in his eyes that day, just for something so small, had kept me alive through so many winters. The memory hit me like a strike to the chest, sharper than the pain already choking me. I wanted to reach for it, to hold on to that boy, but the present dragged me back with brutal force. I tried again to shout, but my throat seized. The silence around me was merciless. I could hear the faint tick of the garden wind chime, nothing else. Then far off, a new sound, thin, distant, but unmistakable. Sirens, an ambulance cutting through the city streets. My heart lurched with a burst of fragile hope. "Here," I wanted to cry. "Here I am." But my lips barely moved. The sirens grew louder, then softer, as if drifting away from me. I couldn't tell if they were real or just some trick of my fading senses. My body grew heavy. My arms and legs, once strong from years of carrying groceries, tending gardens, raising a child alone, now refused me. I clawed at the soil, dragging my fingertips through the wet earth. Nothing. I couldn't move forward. Something pulled at me, an invisible force, almost like hands beneath my arms, urging me to rise. "Stand, Diana," I imagined hearing. "Don't give in." I fought with everything left inside me. My eyes shot open for a moment, the sunlight piercing so harshly it burned. I tried to lift myself. My arm twitched, but my body collapsed again. The pull came again, stronger, like someone was reaching down, refusing to let me fall. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't respond. My chest convulsed, fighting for air that never came. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Each thud was slower, weaker, threatening to stop altogether. The world narrowed. The memory of Adrian surfaced again. This time, his little voice. "Mama, are you cold?" He had held out his mittens, too big for his tiny hands. "You wear them, Mama, I'll be fine." That boy, selfless even in childhood, that was who I remembered as the sky dimmed above me. Tears welled but never fell. I had no strength left even for that. The sirens wailed again, closer, sharper this time. I clung to the sound, praying someone would break through the gate, run to me, lift me from the ground. But no footsteps came, only the faint echo of salvation rushing past somewhere else, too far from me. I wanted to fight, to scream, to demand one more chance. But my voice was gone, buried beneath the crushing weight in my chest. The pull that had tried to lift me grew faint. The hands that had seemed to drag me upward slipped away. My body slackened against the earth. The flowers swayed above me, their yellow petals blurring into streaks of light. The sun, once warm, now glared cold and unyielding. My vision tunneled, shrinking to a pinprick of brightness. And then, stillness. My breath stalled. My limbs surrendered. Darkness swept in, swift and absolute. The last sound I carried with me was the echo of sirens. Whether real or imagined, I never knew. The first thing I felt was the weight of air that wasn't mine. A tube pressed inside my nose, forcing oxygen into me. My eyelids lifted with effort, only to meet the blinding fluorescent light above. Every sound around me was mechanical. The relentless beep of a heart monitor, the hiss of oxygen, the shuffle of rubber soles on tile. I was alive, but barely. A nurse leaned over me. Her eyes were kind, but her movements were urgent. "Stay still," she whispered, adjusting the lines that ran into my arm. You're in the ICU. Who can we contact, ma'am? I tried to form words. My lips trembled, my throat raw. A broken sound escaped me, rough and weak. Adrian? The name caught in my chest like glass. I forced my tongue to shape the numbers of his phone, one by one, but they slipped into a rasp, almost inaudible. My voice cracked before the last digit left my lips. The nurse bent closer, her brows knitting, but then she gently pressed her hand against mine. "Don't strain yourself, we'll call him for you," she said softly. But deep inside, I already feared what that call would bring. Then I heard it, the nurse's voice as she picked up the phone. "Mr. Adrian, this is City General Hospital. Your mother is in critical condition. She needs you here immediately." My heart lurched. My son. My boy. Even after everything, a fragile hope bloomed inside me. Surely he would come. Surely he would drop everything once he heard his mother was fighting for her life. But the line stayed quiet for a long, painful second. And then, his voice. Flat. Cold. Almost bored. "Don't bother me, I'm at a fundraising gala right now. She won't last much longer anyway. Maybe it's better this way." The words pierced deeper than any needle in my arm. My chest constricted, not from the illness, but from something far crueler. The monitor beside me spiked into chaos. Beep, beep, beep. Faster, louder. My body trembled, tears streaming uncontrollably down my temples. I tried to reach out, to plead, to tell him I was still here, that I needed him, but my arms were too weak. The nurse's hand tightened on the phone. "Sir, she can hear you," she said, her voice sharp now. "Do you realize what you're saying?" Adrian laughed, a small dismissive sound. "Then let her. Maybe she'll finally understand she's only a burden." The line clicked. Silence. I wanted to scream, to demand an answer, but my throat refused. Only a strangled sound escaped me, muffled beneath the hiss of oxygen. The nurse set the phone down slowly, shaking her head in disbelief. She reached for my trembling hand, pressing it between her palms. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I've never heard anything like that." But I had. I had heard indifference in his tone before, when I'd asked him to spend time with me, when I had begged him not to waste the money I sacrificed to send him abroad. This, however, was different. This was final. Something inside me cracked. The old Diana, the woman who sold her home to give her son opportunities, who lived frugally so he could shine, who endured loneliness just to see him happy, died in that moment. Each heartbeat on the monitor marked the burial of who I used to be. The nurse adjusted the IV drip, glancing nervously at the numbers flashing red across the monitor. "Stay calm," she urged. "You have to fight." But the fight inside me was changing. No longer was it for him, no longer for a son who dismissed my life as disposable. My fight now was for myself. As the medication burned its way into my veins, I lay still, staring at the ceiling. The pain in my chest remained, but beneath it, a new sensation stirred. Anger. Sharp. Electric. Undeniable. I remembered every coin I had counted for him. Every night I had gone without food so he could eat. Every hour I had worked overtime to pay for lessons, uniforms, books. Every single sacrifice I had convinced myself was love. And here I was, breathing through tubes, while he drank champagne in a tuxedo, calling my life an inconvenience. My tears dried, replaced by something hotter, heavier. I turned slightly, the movement weak but deliberate, to see my reflection in the dark screen of the monitor. The face that stared back was pale, bruised, aged, but the eyes were not the same. I whispered, hoarse but audible enough for the nurse to hear, "No more." Her brows furrowed, but she didn't press me. She only squeezed my hand once more, as if she knew something irreversible had just shifted. The monitor steadied, my heart regaining rhythm, though not from peace, from resolve. I closed my eyes, the echo of Adrian's voice still slicing through me. Maybe it's better this way. Number It would never be better that way. For the first time in years, my heart didn't ache from wanting his approval. It burned with a new purpose. The old Diana was gone. What remained was someone else entirely, someone who had nothing left to lose, and therefore everything to gain. And as the machines hummed and the nurse hovered by my side, I lay there in silence, waiting for the storm inside me to take form, because the woman who would open her eyes tomorrow would not be the same one who collapsed among the flowers. She would not be the woman who gave everything and asked for nothing. She would be someone new. When the doctor finally signed my release papers, I stood at the threshold of the hospital with nothing but a paper bag of medications in my hand. My body was weak, my cheeks hollow, but my eyes burned with a clarity I had never felt before. Every step outside that glass door felt like I was shedding the last skin of the woman who had once begged for love and recognition. The air was sharp and cold. I breathed it in like a promise. The nurse had offered to call a cab, but I shook my head. My legs trembled, but they carried me forward. I knew exactly where I was going. I walked straight to the bank. Inside, the clerk recognized me immediately. For years, I had come in with Adrian by my side, smiling, approving his withdrawals, signing wherever he pointed. Today, I came alone. My voice didn't shake. I want to revoke every authorization under my name, effective immediately. The clerk blinked. Mrs. Diana, are you sure? These accounts are joint, I said immediately. My hand hit the counter with a force that startled even me. I slid my ID across the desk. Cut him off, shut it down, every card, every access point, now. She hesitated, then began typing. Papers were printed, signatures required. For years, my hand had signed papers that drained me. Today, the ink bled into the page like freedom. As I watched her stamp the final document, a rush of adrenaline surged through me. I wasn't trembling anymore. I was alive, but I wasn't done. I want full records, I demanded. Every transaction, every statement from the past 5 years. Her eyebrows rose. That's a lot of paperwork. Then start printing. I'll wait. Pages spilled from the machine. One by one, I gathered them, scanning the familiar names. Designer stores, luxury flights, restaurants I had never set foot in, all charged under my name, my money. My stomach clenched, but not from grief, from fury. I folded the stack neatly, placed it into my bag, and said, "Open a new account, in my name only." When the final form was signed, I felt a switch flip inside me. I was no longer a woman begging for scraps of affection. I was the owner of my life again. Walking out of the bank, I didn't turn toward the bus stop. I went to the boutique across the street. It wasn't luxury I was after. I didn't crave the gleam of labels or the flash of jewels. I wanted to buy something for myself because I wanted it, not because someone else convinced me it was necessary. My hand brushed over a soft fabric, a simple, elegant dress in a warm shade of blue. I held it against me in the mirror. For the first time in years, I saw a woman I almost didn't recognize. Tired, scarred, but standing tall. I bought it without hesitation. From there, I picked up small things. New curtains for the living room, a vase shaped like a blooming tulip, fresh sheets that smelled of lavender. None of it extravagant, all of it mine. I carried the bags home with a determination that outweighed their weight. When I opened the door to my house, the air felt different. It wasn't filled with echoes of footsteps that weren't mine, or shadows of conversations that drained me. It was just me, my space, my sanctuary. I stripped the old curtains, letting the sunlight flood in. I arranged the tulip vase on the dining table and, filled it with fresh daisies I bought from the corner shop. I hung the new dress in my closet, but not before pressing it against my chest once more, whispering to myself, "This is for me." For dinner, I cooked a single meal, not a feast for anyone else, not leftovers thrown together because no one cared. Just one plate, my favorite soup, steaming and fragrant. I set it on the table, lit a small candle, and ate in silence. The food didn't just fill my stomach. It reminded me that I still had power to choose, to live, to be more than a vessel for someone else's comfort. And yet, beneath that fragile calm, the storm was already building. As I flipped through the bank statements later that night, I noticed something strange. Buried between the endless charges for luxury brands was a transfer, large, consistent, repeating, not to Adrian's personal account, somewhere else, a name I didn't recognize. My fingers tightened on the paper. I traced the figures again, month after month, money siphoned off, amounts large enough to hollow out everything I had saved. This wasn't just reckless spending. It was deliberate, purposeful, hidden. A chill swept over me. My son had lied. He hadn't just drained me for his comfort. He had built something in secret, something I wasn't supposed to find. The anger inside me sharpened into resolve. If I had been blind before, I could see now with perfect clarity. He had underestimated me. He thought I would stay weak, dependent, grateful for crumbs. But that version of me died in the hospital. I placed the stack of statements into a folder, sealed it shut, and tucked it into the drawer beside my bed. Tomorrow I would dig deeper. Tomorrow I would confront the truth. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the house felt both emptier and fuller than it ever had. Emptier because his shadow no longer filled it. Fuller because for the first time in decades, my presence was enough. I whispered into the darkness, my voice steady. "Adrian, you have no idea what's coming." And I meant every word. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, crystal glasses clinking as music swelled in the background. I wasn't there to see it with my own eyes, but I could picture it vividly. The world my son had built with my money. I would later hear enough whispers, and even Adrian himself couldn't help but shout parts of the humiliation into my face. He had hosted that gala himself, his name printed on invitations, his voice booming into microphones, calling it his night. He had invited colleagues, business partners, and friends who admired the spectacle he paraded as success. Then the moment came. At the payment table, his smile faltered. The waiter handed back the sleek black credit card, lowering his voice. "I'm sorry, sir. It's been declined." Whispers spread like wildfire. Eyes turned toward him, faces smirking behind champagne glasses. Adrian's hand trembled as he tried another card. Declined. Again. He forced a laugh, but his cheeks flushed crimson. "Oh, no. Technical issue," he stammered, tugging at his tie. I think I'll have to cut the evening short. Such a shame, isn't it? Please enjoy yourselves. Drinks are on the house. I'll settle this later." But the lie was transparent. He was supposed to be the host, the man of the hour. Instead, he was reduced to excuses, his polished image cracking under the chandelier's light. People exchanged glances, disdainful, skeptical. Some whispered, "Isn't he supposed to be wealthy? Why can't he pay?" Adrian muttered something about leaving early, his voice low, desperate to escape. "I'm so sorry, everyone. Duty calls? I'll have to excuse myself." But no excuse could erase the embarrassment already carved into that night. The world he worked so hard to impress was now raising eyebrows, and that stain would spread faster than any praise he had ever bought. I imagine his face as he stormed out, mask shattered, heart pounding, and then my phone rang. "Mom, what the hell did you do?" His voice was wild, ragged, no trace of the calm confidence he wore like a costume. I held the phone steady, my tone even. I only took back what has always been mine. You He cut himself off, shouting again, "Do you realize what you've done? That was my event. My name on the banners, my partners in the room, and I couldn't pay. Do you understand the humiliation?" "Good," I said coldly. "You finally tasted a fraction of what you put me through." There was a silence, broken only by his shallow breathing. Then the roar of an engine came through the line. He was driving too fast, words spilling with the sound of tires biting the road. "They'll destroy me," he ranted. "Pictures will be online by morning. They'll say I'm a fraud. My reputation, my deals, my entire image. It'll all crumble. And you did this." I didn't flinch. "No, Adrian, you did this the day you decided my life was nothing but a wallet you could drain." The slam of a car door echoed minutes later. He had arrived. His footsteps pounded against my porch like thunder. Then the door burst open. Adrian stood in the doorway, tuxedo undone, hair disheveled, sweat on his brow. The man who always prided himself on control was trembling. His eyes burned with fury, but beneath it I saw what he tried to hide: fear. "You ruined me!" he shouted, his voice breaking. "Do you even care what this does to me? To my future?" I rose from my chair slowly, refusing to cower. "I care that you finally see the consequences of your greed." He stepped closer, jabbing a finger toward me. "I could lose everything: my network, my deals, my influence. Do you know how hard I worked to build it?" I met his glare with steel in my eyes. "You didn't build anything, Adrian. You leached. You drained. You used. Every brick in that false castle was mortared with my sacrifice, and tonight it collapsed because I stopped holding it up." He recoiled, as if my words struck harder than any slap. "You can't do this to me," he whispered, but his whisper was desperation, not command. "I already have," I said. He clenched his fists, shaking. "Do you realize how people will laugh at me? How they'll mock me online? How business partners will vanish? This is suicide, Mother. You're dragging me down with you." "No," I replied sharply. "You've been dragging me down for years. I've decided to stand up. If that means you fall, so be it." For a moment his face contorted, rage, panic, disbelief colliding. Then his mask cracked further. He sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. The man who once towered over me was reduced to a trembling shadow. I stood tall, breathing evenly. This was the first time I had seen him without the armor of arrogance. The first time, my voice was louder than his. He looked up, eyes red, and hissed, "You'll regret this." I leaned in, my words precise, cold as steel. "No, Adrian. For the first time in years, I won't." The silence that followed was heavy, charged, final. He had no words left to throw, no cards to play. His empire of illusions had cracked in one night, and I had been the hand that pushed. For the first time, I saw fear in him, not the fear of me, but the fear of a man watching his world collapse while the mother he thought powerless stood unshaken. And in that silence, I realized I had won the first battle. I knew Adrian wouldn't stop. He was too desperate, too proud, too addicted to the illusion of power. If I wanted to end this, I needed facts, cold, undeniable proof that could tear through every excuse he might spin. So I hired a private investigator. His name was Porter, a man with lines of experience etched across his face and eyes that never missed a detail. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "If you want dirt, Mrs. Diana, I'll find it. But once I start digging, you'd better be ready to face whatever surfaces. People like your son, they rarely keep their mess small." I didn't blink. "I want the truth, no matter how rotten it is." He nodded, then disappeared into the web of shadows where men like him thrived. Days passed. I waited, restless, watching the hours tick away. Then the reports began trickling in. Porter was thorough. He didn't just watch Adrian, he trailed every string connected to him. Melissa, Clara, the company, my stolen money. The first photographs hit me like ice water. Melissa, my daughter-in-law, strolling out of an Hermes boutique, her manicured hand gripping a glossy orange shopping bag. The receipt tucked into the file showed she had paid with my account, one labeled Emergency Family Fund. Yet she walked as if she were royalty, her expression smug, swinging that bag like it was nothing. The images cut to another day. Melissa at a cafe, sipping wine with a friend. The friend leaned in, eyes wide. "You're lucky." Her lips seemed to form. "No one in the office ever sees you do much work, yet you're always so comfortable." Melissa only smiled, crossing her legs, saying nothing. But the tilt of her chin screamed arrogance, as if the money spilling into her hands was hers by birthright, not siphoned off from my veins. The next set of photographs stabbed deeper. Adrian, arm in arm with Clara, a woman whose beauty was cold and deliberate. They weren't hiding. They dined at a restaurant where walls glittered with chandeliers and menus held no prices. Clara leaned across the table, laughing softly, while Adrian handed over a black card, the same account stamped urgent household expenses. The waiter swiped it, nodded, and returned. The bill, thousands of dollars, was marked down later in a statement as company emergency supplies. I clenched the papers so tightly my knuckles whitened. It wasn't just dinners. Porter slid more evidence across the table. "This," he said, tapping a folder, "isn't just infidelity or greed. It's theft. Funds rerouted from your household account into shell expenses. It bleeds into his company's books, too. Misappropriations, falsified reimbursements. It's systematic." The documents confirmed it. Transfers hidden under vague descriptions, operations gap, urgent cash, emergency coverage. But the receipts told a different story. Luxury spas, jewelry, hotel suites under Clara's name. I remembered one photo in particular, Adrian exiting a high-end hotel, Clara on his arm, her lipstick smeared into a grin. At the same time, Melissa was captured stepping out of a chauffeured car, another Hermes purchase in her hand. The timestamps matched. My money paid for all of it. His lies, her vanity, their betrayal wrapped into glossy shopping bags and hotel sheets. But Porter wasn't done. "There's more. This isn't just about family indulgence. He's bleeding the company, too. Look here." The last file was the thickest. Invoices signed by Adrian, cash flowing out under the guise of community partnerships and urgent business dinners. Except the so-called partners were ghost entities, shell accounts feeding straight into his personal spending. Employees had started whispering. Porter slid me a transcript of overheard conversations. One worker said to another, "Funny how Melissa always has designer things, huh? I barely see her at the office." Another replied, "Don't ask." "We all know something's off, but nobody dares talk too loud. He controls the payroll." I didn't need anyone to tell me. The photographs screamed loud enough. Porter finally pushed a thick, leather-bound folder toward me. "This is everything," he said. "Receipts, statements, photographs, eyewitness accounts. It's airtight." I touched the folder, my chest rising and falling as rage warred with resolve. "So it's true," I whispered. Porter leaned back, his gaze steady. "It's worse than most cases I see. This isn't simple greed, it's entitlement. They don't even hide it well anymore. They think you'll never fight back." I stared at the photographs of my son, the boy I once held, now a man feeding his pride with poison purchased from my sacrifice. I thought of Melissa, draped in silk, laughing at a world that never made her earn it. Clara, a stranger entangled in my family's ruin. I pressed my palm against the folder. It felt heavy, but also liberating. For years, my silence had been their shield. Now, the truth was in my hands, sharp enough to cut through every lie. When Porter rose to leave, he paused at the door. "Be careful," he warned. "People like them, when cornered, lash out. This proof will scare them more than poverty ever could." I nodded slowly. Let them be scared. The moment the door closed behind him, I opened the folder again. Page after page, image after image, number after number. My pulse pounded, not from sorrow this time, but from fire. I whispered to myself, each word laced with steel, no more. Because in that mountain of evidence lay the weapon I needed, not only to reclaim what was mine, but to make sure they could never strip it from me again. The Diana who once cowered, who once begged for scraps of kindness, was gone. With every photograph I turned, I buried her deeper. What rose in her place was a woman who would fight, who would expose, who would burn their lies down with the truth they themselves created. I closed the folder and set it on the table like a loaded gun. The battle ahead would be brutal. But for the first time, I had the bullets, and I swore to myself I would use every single one. I didn't leave the next step to chance. Porter, my investigator, and my attorney both agreed. The best evidence wasn't just papers. It was words, unguarded words from the ones who thought they would never be questioned. So we staged it. A casual meeting, orchestrated with precision. I walked into a quiet upscale cafe, the kind where whispers carried further than shouts. She was already there. Clara, the mistress. Beautiful in that polished, temporary way, but her eyes flickered with nervous pride. She thought this was coincidence. She had no idea every second was calculated. I set my handbag on the chair beside me, making sure the thick folder of documents inside was visible when I pulled it open slightly. Porter sat at the far corner, blending into the background. My lawyer pretended to read a newspaper 2 tables away. Clara smiled as if greeting an old acquaintance. "Mrs. Diana, what a surprise." I returned the smile, but mine was sharper. "Clara." My voice was steady, steel wrapped in silk. "Sit." She sat, her perfume too sweet, her posture too confident. She leaned closer, lowering her voice in mock intimacy. "You know, Adrian told me you were supportive. He said you understood, that you wanted him to find happiness again, that you even told him I was the fresh start he deserved." The air between us turned to glass. My fingers tightened around the handle of my handbag. "Is that so?" Clara nodded eagerly, not noticing the trap she was already walking into. "Yes, he always said you didn't mind, that Melissa was, how do I put it, tolerable for business, but not really his heart. And honestly, Melissa doesn't even care. She has her own ways to keep herself comfortable." I tilted my head, watching her carefully. "Her own ways?" Clara smirked, lowering her voice further, almost gloating. "Come on, Mrs. Diana, you must know. Melissa's little arrangements in the company. The way she signs things, takes cuts, makes cash flow to her own side projects. Adrian told me it's practically a family tradition, everyone getting what they want. She doesn't work much, but she always has money for herself. He says you never question it, that you cover for her even." My pulse slowed to a dangerous calm. Every word tumbled out of Clara's mouth like spilled jewels, gems of stupidity, glittering proof of everything we needed. I leaned closer, my voice low but firm. "Clara, do you realize what you just said?" She blinked, confused. "I'm just telling you the truth." "Why? Does it bother you?" "Bother me?" My voice dropped into steel. "You claim my son used my name to excuse his betrayal. You claim my daughter-in-law robs from the company with his blessing. And you've sat here, spilling it all without even a second thought." Clara flushed, her smile faltering. "I didn't mean—" I cut her off. "You meant exactly what you said, and it's all right here." I tapped the open side of my handbag where the tiny recorder was blinking. Her eyes followed it, widening in realization. Her lips parted. You set me up." I didn't blink. "I gave you the chance to speak freely, and you did. Thank you." She pushed back in her chair, flustered. "This isn't fair. Adrian will hear his own mistress confirm what the records already show," I interrupted, my voice slicing through her protest. Melissa's embezzlement, his affair, their joint theft of my accounts. Do you know what that means in court, in business, in family? Clara's face drained of color. For the first time, her polished facade cracked. I didn't want trouble. I thought, he told me. I stood, towering over her without raising my voice. He told you lies, and you believed them. That was your mistake. Mine was believing I raised a son who knew honor. But unlike you, Clara, I intend to correct my mistake. She fumbled with her purse, searching for words. I didn't mean to ruin anything. I leaned in one last time, my words a whisper sharp enough to cut. You already did. Then I straightened, nodded subtly toward Porter and my lawyer. They moved at once, securing the recording, collecting the fragments of evidence now bound with Clara's voice. I walked out of the cafe, the weight of the folder heavier but my steps lighter. The sun outside burned brighter than it had in months. For years, they had painted me as frail, disposable. But in that moment, with Clara's foolish confession echoing in my ears, I knew the tide had shifted. I had more than documents now. I had words, their words, and those words would destroy them. When I returned home, I placed the thick folder of evidence on my desk, but I couldn't open it right away. My fingers hovered over the cover, trembling, not from fear, but from something far more complicated. Adrian was my son, flesh of my flesh. I carried him, fed him, prayed for him when he was small. That bond doesn't vanish, even when betrayal slices it open. A part of me still wanted to believe there was some mistake, some way he had been dragged into Melissa's schemes unwillingly. I wanted to remember the boy who once held my hand at the park, not the man who now hid knives behind his back. But the truth was staring me down. His signature was on those withdrawals. His voice, through Clara, had claimed my approval for his affair, and his silence about Melissa's theft was as loud as a gunshot. I pressed my palm to my chest, whispering to myself, "You're still his mother, but you can't be his shield anymore." That night, the storm broke elsewhere, in their mansion. I wasn't there in person, but the accounts I heard from the investigator and the photos circulating online afterward were enough to burn themselves into my memory. The scene was gaudy. Adrian and Melissa in their oversized living room, chandeliers glowing against imported marble, but the atmosphere reeked of rot. She lounged on the white leather sofa in silk loungewear, scrolling through her phone with manicured fingers. "Did your mother call again?" Melissa's voice was sharp, her tone filled with disdain. She didn't even look at him when she spoke. Adrian adjusted his tie, already loosened from another empty meeting that led nowhere. "Yes, she left messages." I ignored them. Melissa scoffed. "Good. The woman needs to learn her place. Tell her to stop meddling." Then, with a smirk, she tossed her phone onto the glass table. "Anyway, I need 10,000 this week. My spa membership is renewing. Oh, and there's a new retreat in Palm Springs I want to attend with the girls." Adrian shifted uncomfortably. "Things are tighter right now." Her head snapped toward him, eyes flashing. "Tighter? Don't start with excuses. You know exactly where to pull the money from. That's what the company account is for. You've done it before. Don't act like you're suddenly nervous." He swallowed, his jaw clenched. "But Melissa, people are starting to notice. There are rumors." She stood, towering over him, though she was in slippers. "Rumors don't matter if we look untouchable. Post more pictures. Throw another dinner. That's how you kill gossip. Do you want people to think we're struggling? Do you want your friends laughing about you behind your back?" Adrian hesitated. Then, as always, he folded. "Fine. I'll move the funds tomorrow." Melissa leaned down, planting a kiss on his cheek as though sealing the command. "Good boy. That's why I married you." The next day, the consequences spilled out in the open. At their so-called charity brunch, cameras flashed while they paraded in designer clothes bought with stolen money. But something was different this time. Instead of admiration, Whispers spread like wildfire. "Isn't that the couple who laid off half the staff last month? I heard their company is drowning in debt. Look at her spending like nothing's wrong." Adrian forced a laugh too loud, raising his glass as if to drown the voices. Melissa plastered on her fake smile, gripping his arm until her knuckles whitened. But the contempt wasn't hidden anymore. It was public, swelling, unstoppable. One guest, bold enough to sneer openly, muttered within earshot, "A walking circus. He's nothing without his mother's money." The words landed like a slap. Adrian's face darkened, but he swallowed his anger, pretending not to hear. They thought appearances could still save them. They thought Instagram posts of champagne flutes could erase spreadsheets dripping with theft. But reality was catching up, and I watched from afar, torn in two. Because while part of me felt the satisfaction of seeing their masks crack, another part, the mother still buried inside me, ached. I wanted to grab Adrian by the shoulders, shake him, scream, "Wake up before it's too late." But he wasn't listening. He hadn't listened in years. Instead, he let Melissa steer the wheel straight into the abyss. That night, he called me, not to apologize, not to confess, but to shout, "Mother, what have you done?" His voice shook, but not with remorse, with panic. "You cut me off, and now everyone's whispering. Do you know what this does to my reputation? To my image?" I held the phone close, my knuckles white. "Adrian, what about what you've done? To me, to the company, to yourself?" "Don't lecture me," he snapped. "You owe me. Without it, I'm nothing. Do you understand that? Nothing." I let his words hang, heavy, poisonous. "Then maybe it's time you learn to be something without stealing from me." There was a pause. I heard Melissa's voice in the background, shrill, commanding, "Hang up. Stop wasting time. Tell her to transfer the money or we'll cut her off entirely." I closed my eyes, pain cutting through me like glass. The only regret I carry is raising a son who traded his integrity for luxury. That regret ends now. I hung up. My hands shook. My heart cracked. But the silence after the line went dead was the first moment of peace I'd felt in months. World was beginning to see them for what they truly were. I didn't need to smear their names. They were doing it themselves. My job now was to hold on to the evidence, the truth, and wait for the right moment to strike. But as I sat alone that night, staring at a photo of Adrian as a child, smiling, innocent, his hand in mine, I felt tears burn my eyes. I loved my son. That would never change. But love doesn't mean blindness. And if protecting him meant letting Melissa devour everything we built, then love had to take another form, a harsher one. A mother's mercy was over. Justice was coming. The following morning, I sat in the waiting room of my attorney's office. The blinds were drawn halfway, letting in slivers of sunlight across the polished oak table. My heart pounded like a war drum, but my face was carved in stone. For too long, I had hesitated. For too long, I had let my emotions stall what needed to be done. That ended today. When my name was called, I rose slowly, clutching the folder of evidence against Adrian and Melissa. The weight of it pressed into my palm like iron. I walked in, and there was Mr. Keller, my lawyer of nearly 2 decades, waiting for me with a look that mixed sympathy with professionalism. "Mrs. Hale," he said gently, "I wasn't sure I'd see you here today." I sat across from him, my voice cutting through the silence. "It's time. Draft the changes, effective immediately." His brows furrowed. "You're certain? What we discussed is irreversible. Adrian will be left with nothing. No stake in the company, no inheritance from your estate. And as for the corporate guarantees, you'd be pulling every shield that protects him from creditors." I leaned forward, meeting his gaze without blinking. "I am certain. He has already chosen his path. I refuse to keep financing his destruction." Keller opened a leather folder, slid a draft across the table. Then you'll need to sign here. This revokes all prior wills and amendments. And this, he pointed to another page, removes all personal guarantees from the bank loans tied to your son's ventures. I picked up the pen. For a moment, my hand trembled, like a mother still resisting the finality of cutting her child loose. I saw Adrian's face in my mind, not as he was now, but as a boy running into my arms after his first scraped knee. My chest tightened. The urge to stop was almost unbearable, but then Melissa's voice echoed in my memory, cold, venomous. Tell her to transfer the money or we'll cut her off entirely. I gritted my teeth. The pen steadied. Mr. Keller studied me carefully. If you want, we can take another day. Think this through. No. My voice snapped like a whip. Every day I wait, he steals more. He falls deeper, and I become his accomplice by silence. That ends now. I pressed the pen to paper and signed. The ink bled into the lines with finality. My hand shook once, but then grew, steady. A strange calm settled over me, like I had finally torn free from chains I didn't realize I had worn for years. When the last stroke was done, Keller closed the folder. It's official. He no longer has a legal claim, and the company, without your backing, will face reality on its own. I exhaled slowly, then let reality do what I couldn't. On the ride back home, I stared out the car window. Streets rolled past, blurred by motion, yet every image felt sharp. Couples walking, children laughing, strangers living lives free from betrayal. And me, I was a mother who had just signed her son's ruin. My driver asked softly, "Are you all right, ma'am?" I answered without hesitation, "I'm stronger than I've ever been." That evening I sat alone in my study. The new documents were in front of me, stamped and sealed. The pen I had used still rested on the desk. I picked it up again, turning it between my fingers, marveling at how such a simple object could decide legacies, lives, and futures. My phone buzzed, another message from Adrian. I didn't open it. I already knew it would be demands, insults, or both. Instead, I placed the phone face down. My eyes returned to the documents. No more lifelines, no more safety nets. I whispered the words aloud, letting them hang in the air like a vow. Later that week, I met Keller once more to finalize the filings with the court. His assistant stamped the last forms and slid them into a safe folder. Keller looked at me with a mix of respect and solemnity. "You know," he said, "in all my years, I've seen wealthy parents cling to children who ruin them, terrified of cutting the cord. Most never do. But you've chosen truth over comfort." I gave a faint smile, though my chest ached. Truth hurts, but lies destroy. I won't let Melissa and Adrian burn my name, my company, and my granddaughter's future just to fund their vanity. Keller nodded. "Then it's done. What happens next will be on them, not you." As I walked out, I felt lighter. The sky outside was overcast, yet somehow brighter than before. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for disaster. I was preparing to face it head on. And Adrian, when he discovered what I had done, he would realize the game had changed. That night, I placed the sealed will and legal amendments into my safe. My fingers lingered on the cold steel of the lock as I whispered one final truth to myself. I gave you life, Adrian, but I will not give you my death. The click of the lock echoed through the empty house. It was the sound of an era ending and of a reckoning beginning. The call came at dawn. I was sipping black coffee when my phone vibrated, flashing a message from Keller. It has begun. The banks have filed for recovery. By noon, the first wave hit. Adrian's phone exploded with calls. I heard about it from a colleague who forwarded me a recording. "This is Wellsburg Trust." A firm voice said, "Your account is overdrawn. Payment is due immediately. Your guarantor has withdrawn. Consider this your final warning before asset seizure. I could almost picture Adrian's face turning pale, sweat beading his forehead. That same day, 2 black SUVs pulled up to Melissa's favorite spa downtown. Cameras clicked furiously as uniformed officers and financial agents strode in. Melissa, wrapped in a silk robe, hair pinned high, tried to protest. "There must be a mistake," she cried, clutching her designer bag. But the agent's tone was steel. "Not a mistake. The company vehicles and properties tied to your account are now repossessed." When they rolled her white luxury SUV out of the underground garage, paparazzi surged forward. Flashbulbs exploded. Melissa's perfect mask cracked, her smile twisted into a scream. One headline that evening read, "From diamonds to debt, Melissa Hale's empire collapses." And then came the internet. Hashtags spread like wildfire. "Stop Adrian," "Your justice for workers," "Fraud family." Clips surfaced of employees outside his company, holding signs that read, "We want our paychecks," and "No more lies." The chants were relentless, echoing across social media feeds. "Stop Adrian! Stop Adrian!" A viral video captured Melissa being escorted from a boutique as clerks refused her credit card. Her furious shriek, "Do you know who I am?" was drowned out by laughter from the crowd. I watched it all from my quiet living room, the television muted, the captions scrolling. My hands did not tremble this time. For so long, I had wondered if I would be the villain for cutting him off. But now, the truth was clear. Adrian and Melissa had built their palace on lies, and without my protection, it collapsed like rotten wood under fire. Inside Adrian's office, chaos reigned. I later learned through the investigator I hired that the bank's legal team walked straight in during a board meeting. "You have 72 hours, the lead attorney declared, dropping a stack of papers onto the mahogany table. "Failure to comply will result in seizure of company assets." Melissa tried to argue, her voice shrill. "You can't do this. We're respected clients." But the man didn't flinch. Respect doesn't pay debts. Adrian's mask finally cracked. He slammed his fist against the table, shouting, "This is sabotage. Someone's pulling strings against me." Melissa snapped back. "You promised your mother would never abandon us." I could imagine Adrian's silence then, his realization, because deep down he knew exactly who had finally shut the door. The collapse spread faster than wildfire. Within days, investors pulled out. Journalists circled like vultures. One morning, the trending headline read, "Former heiress' son faces bankruptcy. Mother's support withdrawn." Evening news showed clips of Melissa's repossessed cars lined up outside the impound lot. Luxury, sedans, gleaming but powerless, waiting to be auctioned. The image carried its own poetry. Once symbols of untouchable wealth, now nothing more than tagged evidence of excess. One clip struck me hardest. Melissa stood outside her mansion gates, paparazzi swarming, mascara running down her cheeks. She shouted at the cameras, "It's all lies, we're fine!" Behind her, though, movers carried boxes labeled with bank seals. Furniture, art, rugs, all lifted into trucks under the eyes of creditors. The crowd's laughter was merciless. Someone shouted, "Where's your spa money now?" Another yelled, "Pay your employees!" Melissa shrieked until her voice broke. The footage looped across every platform. Adrian, meanwhile, vanished from sight. He stopped answering calls. Rumors said he spent nights locked in his study, drinking, smashing glasses against the wall. His empire had crumbled, his name dragged through mud, and for the first time in years, no one was there to bail him out. I did not smile. This was not joy. This was justice, brutal and overdue. I walked to my safe, pulled out the sealed documents I had signed, and traced my finger across the embossed seal. This was why. Without my protection, his corruption could not survive daylight. My phone buzzed again, a message forwarded by Keller, a trending tweet with hundreds of thousands of likes. "When your mother says no more, The whole world sees who you really are. Stop, Adrian. I leaned back in my chair. The storm was no longer mine to carry. It was theirs, and it had arrived in full force. The following evening, my granddaughter came to visit. She had seen the news, the videos, the endless posts. Her eyes, wide with shock, searched mine. "Grandma, did you know this would happen?" I didn't answer right away. I set down my teacup, folded my hands carefully, and then said, "I knew the truth could not stay hidden forever." She whispered, "But it's so public. Everyone's talking." I met her gaze steadily. Sometimes, the only way to stop poison is to let the whole world see it for what it is, and now they see. She was silent, but I saw relief flicker across her face, relief that someone, finally, had drawn the line. That night, I sat by the window. Outside, the city buzzed with its own rhythm, unaware of the storm tearing through my son's life. I whispered to myself, not with grief this time, but with iron resolve. You thought my silence meant surrender, but it was only the calm before your reckoning. And the reckoning had come. The mansion, once glowing with chandeliers and endless parties, now sat in silence, curtains drawn, lights cut. Even the fountain outside had dried to a silent stone basin. I imagined Adrian and Melissa inside, two figures in a gilded cage-turned-tomb. Phones rang endlessly, a chorus of creditors, journalists, and lawyers. The sound bounced off the marble walls like a relentless hammer. Melissa paced the living room in her silk robe, her designer heels clicking against the cold floor. She hurled her handbag against the sofa, her voice rising to a screech. "You promised me," she shouted. "You said your mother would protect us forever." Adrian sat hunched in the armchair, his once sharp suit, wrinkled, collar open, tie loose. A phone buzzed in his hand, the bank's number flashing across the screen. His fingers trembled. The device slipped and hit the floor with a hollow thud. "Answer it," Melissa barked. Adrian muttered, "There's nothing left to say. They want money. I don't have it." The phone rang again, then another, then another. A symphony of demands. Melissa grabbed one from the table, pressing it to her ear. "This is Mrs. Hale," she snapped. "My husband will call you back." A cold voice cut her short. "Your assets are frozen. Prepare for legal proceedings. We'll see you in court." Melissa's mouth fell open. She threw the phone down like it burned her. She spun toward Adrian, eyes blazing. "Do something. Call someone. We can't let this happen. You're Adrian Hale. You don't lose." Adrian buried his face in his hands. "They've already taken the cars, the accounts, even the stock portfolio. It's all gone, Melissa. Gone." Her scream tore through the house. She stormed to the liquor cabinet, yanked out a crystal bottle, and hurled it against the wall. Glass shattered. Liquid dripped down the wallpaper in amber streaks. "You liar!" she cried. "You dragged me into this circus. You swore we'd never fall." Adrian's voice cracked. I thought she would never turn her back." The silence after those words was heavier than any shout. Melissa froze, her breath ragged, realizing what he meant. His mother had cut him off, and with her, every shield had vanished. But Melissa wasn't one to surrender. She snatched her phone, dialing furiously. "I'll get a lawyer. I'll sue them for defamation. I'll shut the journalists down." Call after call. Each one ended the same. Either the line disconnected, or the voice on the other end replied with measured calm. "Mrs. Hale, your reputation precedes you. Our firm cannot represent you." Another. "We don't take fraud cases, especially ones this public." And finally, the cruelest. "You don't have the funds for our retainer. Don't waste our time." Melissa's confidence drained with every rejection. Her shoulders slumped. The diamond on her finger looked absurd now, a glittering stone on a sinking ship. I pictured the scene vividly. Adrian trembling, Melissa pacing, their phones glowing like vultures circling, The mansion once felt like a fortress, but now every ring, every headline, every knock on the door was another crack in its walls. The satisfaction burned hot in my chest. For years they had played untouchable, but no fortress withstands the truth. Melissa tried one last desperate attempt. She called an old socialite friend. "You have to help me," she begged, voice shaking. The reply was icy. "Help you? Everyone knows what you and Adrian did. My brand can't survive standing next to yours. Don't call me again." Click. Silence. Melissa dropped the phone. Her knees buckled. For the first time, her defiance collapsed into despair. Adrian whispered, almost to himself, "It's over." She turned on him, clawing at his shirt. "This is your fault, your weakness. You let her take everything away." Adrian shoved her back, his eyes hollow. "No, Melissa, we did this to ourselves." The doorbell rang. Both of them froze. The sound echoed through the mansion like a death knell. Melissa's voice cracked. "Who is it?" Adrian didn't move. Another ring, louder. Outside, I knew the media vans had lined the driveway, their cameras ready, reporters shouting questions, neighbors peeking over fences, the world watching the once invincible couple rot in their own darkness. Inside, Adrian and Melissa sat surrounded by silence, broken glass, and the endless hum of unanswered phones. For me, it was the first course of justice served. Not yet the end, but the beginning of their true reckoning. And I savored every second of it. I waited in the dining room, the folder of documents laid out in front of me, and the small velvet box at the center of the table. Inside, the wristwatch my husband had cherished. I had redeemed it quietly, and now it sat as silent testimony. Adrian and Melissa arrived together. He looked drained, shoulders slumped. She strutted in with forced confidence, clutching her designer purse as if it could shield her. I gestured. "Sit." Melissa dropped her bag on the table with a thud. Adrian sank into the chair, eyes fixed on the floor. I opened the box. The watch gleamed. "Do you remember this?" I asked softly. Adrian swallowed hard, his throat working. Melissa scoffed. "We're here for a used watch." I didn't answer. Instead, I slid a receipt across the table. Pawn shop, Adrian's name written clearly. His face collapsed. He didn't deny it. Melissa leaned forward. "So what?" "Everyone sells old things. That doesn't mean anything." I pulled out the folder and spread the contents. Invoices for luxury handbags, statements of first-class flights, photos from gala dinners, hotel bills dripping with excess. Melissa froze. Adrian's hands began to shake. I leaned in, voice steady. "This is where my money went. While I was left alone, you burned it on champagne, cars, and silk gowns." Melissa's face blanched. "You have no right to—" I cut her short. "No right. You used my name as collateral. You signed loans in my shadow, and now you'll face what comes next." I produced the bank's legal notice. I let it fall before her. Melissa snatched it up, eyes darting frantically across the page. Her lips trembled. "No," she whispered. "They wouldn't." "They already did," I said. "The repossession has started. Your cars, your jewelry, your so-called empire gone." Melissa's breath quickened. She looked at Adrian, but he wouldn't meet her gaze. His shame pinned him in silence. Desperate, she tried to stand. "This is fraud. She's framing us." I remained seated, calm. "The court won't see it that way. Fraud, yes, but yours. The banks are pressing charges. The lawyers you keep calling, they won't take your case once these papers go public." Melissa's hands shook so violently she dropped the notice. Her mask cracked fully now. "Adrian, say something. Defend us." Adrian only muttered, "She's right." His voice was barely audible, but it was enough. Melissa's eyes widened in disbelief. For the first time, she understood he would not save her. I pressed the final blow. A photograph. Melissa in the boutique, arms heavy with bags, the same day Adrian's company announced layoffs. I laid it gently on the pile. While others lost their jobs, I said, my tone like steel, you spent without shame. Tell me, Melissa, what will you wear in court, Prada or handcuffs? Her chair scraped as she staggered back. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, a figure stripped of arrogance, drowning in fear. I stood, lifting the watch from its box. This belonged to a man who earned every penny with sweat and honor. And you, I fixed Melissa with a glare, you pawned dignity for vanity. That is your legacy. Adrian lowered his head, shoulders shaking. Melissa remained frozen, pale and trembling, surrounded by receipts that exposed her every lie. I left them there, broken, the silence louder than any words. For the first time in years, the weight was no longer mine to carry. 3 years have passed. Time has a way of softening wounds, yet leaving behind scars that remind us of battles fought and lessons carved deep into the soul. My garden is now in full bloom, roses climbing their trellises, lavender spilling fragrance into the air, the sound of wind chimes echoing gently with every breeze. I walk slowly along the stone path, my hands brushing across the petals, and for the first time in a long time, my heart feels light. Adrian has found his footing again. After everything was stripped away, he chose a different path. Not wealth, not power, but purpose. He now teaches technology to children at the local community center. I've seen him sitting cross-legged on the floor with those children, explaining circuits with chalk-stained hands and laughter rising in the air. There is no arrogance left in him, no hunger for things he cannot hold. Instead, there is humility. There is grace. And in his eyes, I finally see the son I thought I had lost forever. Melissa's fate was sealed the moment the evidence reached the courts. Fraud, embezzlement, manipulation. Her tears in front of the judge could not erase years of deceit. The verdict came swift, a long sentence, behind bars, and now she sits behind iron bars, the cold walls of a prison her only company. No gowns, no pearls, no flashing cameras, just silence, gray uniforms, and the gnawing echo of consequences. Some may say it is harsh, but justice has its own rhythm, and she chose every step that led her there. I still remember the day I visited her trial. She avoided my eyes, shrinking in the defendant's chair as if the world had finally grown too heavy for her to carry. For once, she had no words, no excuses. I did not speak to her then. I did not need to. Life itself had already spoken louder than I ever could. And me? I live simply now. My mornings are filled with the quiet joy of watering plants, hearing bird song, watching the sky turn from dawn to day. My evenings are slower, often spent on the porch with a book and a cup of tea. There are no more constant phone calls, no hidden debts, no suffocating lies pressing against my chest. One object remains my most precious possession, the watch. My husband's watch. I hold it often, the metal warm from my touch, the ticking steady like a heartbeat. When I clasp it in my palm, I feel him close, as though his spirit is reminding me that dignity can be lost but reclaimed, that love can be bruised but never destroyed. On certain evenings, when the sun begins its descent, I walk to the edge of the garden. Tonight is no different. The horizon burns with hues of amber and crimson, light falling softly across the flowers. I sit on the old wooden bench and lift the watch to my ear. The ticking is gentle, unyielding, eternal. My eyes sting, not from sorrow, but from gratitude. I whisper into the air, "We survived." For I have learned that survival is not merely about drawing breath. It is about reclaiming peace after chaos, about finding strength where betrayal once hollowed you out. I was broken, yes, but not defeated. They tried to silence me, to strip me of worth, but I endured. And in the end, truth stood taller than any deception could ever reach. To those who have walked with me through this journey, I owe a piece of my strength. You listened when my voice trembled. You saw when my vision blurred, and together we carried the weight until it lifted. Thank you for bearing witness, for holding space, for reminding me that stories like mine do not vanish in silence. Justice has been served. Adrian rebuilt his life with honesty. Melissa lives within the walls she built for herself. And I rest in the garden my hands planted, with the watch of the man who taught me loyalty and endurance. The world is not perfect. It never will be. But tonight, as the sky dims and the first stars awaken, I choose to believe in the quiet victory of resilience. My scars remain, yes, but they shine as proof that I fought, that I endured, that I emerged not bitter, but wiser. I smile as the last ray of sunlight kisses the horizon. The chapter has closed. The storm has passed. What remains is peace. Pure, steady, undeniable peace. And to you who have walked beside me through every twist, every wound, every revelation, thank you. This was not just my story. In some way, it became ours. And as I sit here in the calm of my garden, I hope you carry with you the same truth I hold in my heart, that no matter how fierce the betrayal, how heavy the pain, or how long the night, dawn will always come.